to find inner peace. We return to the inner peace component,
always
right? It's so powerful.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then I have the healthy habit that I was going to share. Sorry, I forgot.
No.
This is how an ADHD brain.
I love it.
Actually,
I'm thinking of things, and then you're saying that.
Have you ever felt overwhelmed, misunderstood? Like you felt something deep inside, but knew the world around you would reject it? Every single time I've talked to someone about mental health, we always end up talking about conversation, about listening. And I don't mean you right now listening to me ramble. I mean listening to the people around us. Listening to patterns, signals, to meaning that goes far beyond simple dialogue and into all the weird parts of our brain that understand things we just don't have words for. Today, I spoke to someone who spent her entire life learning how to listen. Dr. Juliet Sarmiento, a neurodiversity instructor at Harvard University, and more recently, the founder and CEO of NeuroDive AI. Today, Dr. Sarmiento is working to teach effective communication techniques and build inclusive environments for people with neurodivergent conditions. However, her story didn't start in Cambridge, Massachusetts. Growing up in Mexico City, she faced a world where mental health was stigmatized and therapy was for crazy people. Marine biology was her passion, and she would follow her mother's footsteps to a PhD in animal communication from the University of Cambridge. Then at 21 years old, everything changed. Dr. Sarmiento's life faced an intensely traumatic event, leaving her suffering from PTSD and recurring panic attacks. Her ADHD flared, and she found herself in an environment that offered no resources or support for someone like her. Her story is one of survival and of learning to live with the day-to-day reality of mental health conditions. Her understanding is shaped not only by research, but by true lived experience of trauma-induced growth. My name is Yuvan Rasia, and every 2 weeks, I sit down with people from all walks of life who have something meaningful to offer. Lessons, stories, and honest reflections on personal growth. These conversations aren't about having all the answers. They're about learning from people who've lived through moments of loss, change, and renewal. Welcome to Lived Words.
So I want to start by asking you about this idea of a normal brain. Is there such thing as a normal brain? And if so, what is that?
That's a very powerful question. So there is not such thing as a normal brain. So what society calls a normal brain, it's basically a neurotypical brain. So neurotypical brain means a mind that aligns very well with society norms, right? So then the brain development, it's very interesting because each brain develops differently depending on our experiences, our learning environment, the family where we grew up with, our culture. So there is not such thing as a normal brain, but what society calls normal, it's has to be with the norms, with the culture of each culture. So for example, a normal brain in the US might be a different definition from a normal brain, for example, in Latin America or in other countries.
Right. Okay. So then, sort of a follow-up: is there such thing as a normal mental state, or a sort of an ideal mental state, maybe?
By mental state, please tell me more. Do you mean like how humans behave, or what do you mean by mental state?
I think, when I think about mental states, I think in a conversation that I've had before is the idea of, right, maybe feeling fulfilled in your life or not feeling fulfilled in your life, or being happy all the time or sad all the time or angry all the time. That's, kind of what I think about in terms of mental states. And I'm wondering, right, I think that idea of there's no such thing as a normal brain, right, because of these different cultures and these different locations and geography and environment and family and all that sort of thing. But is there maybe mental states that we can look at and say, like, this is normal, this is something that we should try to achieve in terms of our state of mind, in terms of the way that we are experiencing the world or thinking about the world, positively or negatively, or reactions to things?
That's very interesting. So they are three emotional regulation systems, right? So then we can visualize them in three colors. So then we have, when you mention about emotions, like feeling, for example, feeling angry, feeling scared, that would be, let's imagine that part, when that part of the brain activates, it's a red color. So it's a threat system. So the threat system, or when our brain is activated, has to do with the amygdala. So a part of the brain, so we have here the brain. The amygdala would be somewhere around in the limbic system, which is inside the cortical area. So subcortical area, my apologies. So cortical is the part, the external part of our brain, and the subcortical area is the part in the inside, right? So when our red system or threat system is activated, it means that it's our amygdala is activated, right? So what happens then? When our amygdala is activated, we have hormones like adrenaline or cortisol, and then it's called the stress hormone, right? So then that is going to be activated by default. So we are always going to feel we're always going to feel like scared if there is like a loud noise.
Right.
If someone yells at us, we will feel like angry. But the important thing is a balanced, right? So then once our amygdala our threat system is activated, then we have to be very mindful to know about the other systems. The other two systems is the blue part, which is actually the nucleus accumbens, and that is what motivates us, and that is called the drive system.
Okay.
Right, so that's the blue one. And then what happens very often in society is that we are jumping between our threat system and our drive system. So we feel anxious, stress, and then we feel motivated, and then we are basically jumping through those two systems. But then what happens? We forget about the third one. The third one is the green one, or the soothing system, which is basically the prefrontal part of the brain, which is the part that is like around in this area. So that's the prefrontal cortex, and then we often forget about that part. So we often forget about, stop and refresh, and sleep is one of the most powerful ways to restore the balance, right? So then just to sum up, we have the three systems. The threat system, the red system, that activates often, every single day. What is important is to know how we can regulate them, right? So then, for example, when we want to achieve something, is the blue system, the drive system. And then when we want to recharge, connect is the soothing system, the green one. So then we have to have a balance between all of them.
Got it. How do we get balance between our system? I'm assuming that's not something that sort of just happens naturally. How do we balance our systems, our soothing system and our drive system and our fight and flight sort of stress system?
Exactly. So it depends on the person, like, for example, what do you do, for example, to recharge yourself? So what do you do to go into your peaceful mindset? What do you do, for example?
I like to read. I used to read a lot as a kid. I think for me, it's something that connects me to what, like, growing up, being young. I remember just reminds me of kind of simpler times, I suppose, right? Being a kid, and it just sort of relaxes me into that sort of mental capacity.
I love that. That is exactly one of the most powerful ways to relax, right? Reading, going for a walk, talking to a friend. For example, there is this amazing experience I had so there is a mindfulness meditation, a meditation called Vipassana. It's a 10-day mindfulness silent retreat. So you are silent for 10 days, actually 9, because on the 10th day you start talking. And this is one of the most powerful ways that I have found to find inner peace. So that's kind of like the most amazing way I have found in my experience to train my soothing system to really find inner peace. So through Vipassana.
Yeah. How does that work? I guess that would be my question. Yeah.
Of course. So, for example, Vipassana, I believe it's rooted in Buddhism, And then it has to do with finding inner peace and then learning to feel your emotions. So what happened with me is that my brain got some sort of like disassociation. I was kidnapped in Mexico City. And what happened there, I was 21 years old. And what happened was that in order to survive, my brain sort of like disassociated from my body in the sense that that sometimes happens with like life-threatening situations where your brain just tries to survive, right? So then I experienced a disconnection between my body and my brain, right? That in order to survive. And I was with my dad. Thankfully, we both survived. They had guns, and then they tried to shoot my dad in the head. They actually did it, but then my dad survived. And then for me to experience these and not knowing in Mexico about mental health, right? This was when I was 21 years old. And I had no idea I heard about PTSD and, like depression, anxiety, but it was just something that was there. And I never, because of ignorance, of not knowing about mental health, I thought kind of I didn't know that would happen to me, right? So then after this traumatic experience, what happens was that I just didn't treat my PTSD for 5 years.
Yeah.
And not because I didn't want to treat it or because the stigma that often happens in Mexico, that there is this very harmful thought that if you go to the psychology, you're crazy. And I'm saying crazy, that's a very harmful word. It's not inclusive.
Yeah.
So basically, it was not for that. It was just ignorance. It's kind of like, I don't know, I knew it existed, but I never thought to try it until one friend of mine told me I was in my PhD at the University of Cambridge. And then she told me, so it sounds that you would benefit from therapy and it's free. And I'm like, free stuff. I love free stuff. And then I love experiences. And I thought it was amazing. So that was my first experience with therapy. It was a counseling, and I remember that it was so amazing how I was able to just talk with a professional. And what I describe it is that I describe it to my students as carrying this massive container of water, right? That accumulates with experiences, traumatic experiences, everything, right?
Yeah.
And then when you go to therapy, it's almost like opening a tap, and then it starts getting lighter and lighter and lighter. So then the first three sessions of my first therapy session, I was crying the whole time. Yeah. So my counselor would have my clinics there, and then do you need to, and it felt so freeing. It felt really
amazing.
So freeing. And then she actually told me, it sounds that you might experience PTSD, but then what happens? Imagine, so then our brain stops developing, kind of like the brain development, it's around 25 years old. There are some studies that even at 30 years old, the brain keeps developing. But then what happens? When I was kidnapped at age 21, imagine what happens to my brain if it stops developing or kind of finalizes development at 25. So there's this period of 5 years that my brain developed differently, right? So then what we would call a neurotypical brain, it's not my brain because my brain didn't develop with PTSD, untreated PTSD for 5 years. Yeah. So then something very interesting that happens as well in the brain in the development between the it's between 20 years and 25 years old. Yeah. So what happens is that the connections that happen between the brain, so we talk about the amygdala, that is a gray matter on the brain. So we talk about, for example, nucleus accumbens. So we have different parts of the brain that are, let's visualize them as buildings, right? Sure. So then they are buildings with data that process data. And then the roads that connect those buildings, so that's meaning that they are like highways to connect those buildings, they start developing, let's say, between 18 to 25 years old. So those roads in my brain are different.
Right.
because of the experience with the PTSD.
Right.
So then the white matter is, let's imagine the white matter as a connection. So they start connecting those buildings, right? So then in my case, they are different. They are different connections
Yeah.
between those, the gray matter and the white matter.
Got it. Is that, and then that's just something that happened because of your experiences, because of what happened to you in Mexico and just growing up and things around you? Is that's just kind of how you developed?
That's a very interesting question. Yes. So what happens, for example, it doesn't have to be a very traumatic experience
Okay.
for the brain to develop different. So, for example, it could be also a case of complex PTSD, which is where a child experiences a very difficult childhood, or just a difficult childhood, like where the parents are not there. For example, there is kind of like there is not emotional stability or emotional safety. So then the child could also develop a complex PTSD, which is, for example, a larger amygdala. So then that means that the emotional regulation, there is, so when the amygdala is slightly larger because of traumatic experience, it can be any type of traumatic experience, the connection between the regulation on the prefrontal cortex, which regulates our emotions, can be different. It's different, right? So then there is a possibility that with complex PTSD, something that might be like something that could be a conflict that could be solved easily. So there is this massive hypersensitivity to rejection, for example, or this massive difficulty on regulating emotions.
Right.
So then it's very important to learn about how the brain develops, and then how can we retrain our brain, because there is also something called neuroplasticity, which means that we can retrain our brain, we can reprogram our brain.
Yeah, and that's something that you learn about in school. Neuroplasticity, I think, is something that is higher when you're younger, right? And then as you get older, it decreases, but it still can be rewired. Super fascinating brain chemistry stuff. I want to talk about the idea of ignorance, because you brought it up when talking about your experience. You didn't know about therapy. That wasn't like a thing that people did, unless, like you said, you were crazy, right? And it's something that I see here in the U.S. too. There's always this kind of idea that, like, if you're going to therapy, it's because you have something wrong with you, right? There's a mental illness. You're not right? You're not normal. And one of the biggest things I started this podcast is that I've learned is therapy is like something that we all need, right? I think trauma is something that we all have in different ways, different experiences. Your trauma is different than my trauma. It's different than my classmates' trauma. But we all have stuff that has happened, and therapy is such a powerful tool to escape that. But this idea of ignorance, there's always so many people who are like kind of stuck on this idea that if you go to therapy, we all need it, right? But if you take the step to asking for help, then that's a sign of weakness. And I think I see that all the time, kind of everywhere, really.
Thank you for sharing. I appreciate you. I completely agree with you. So, for example, in Mexico, there is this very strong stigma about, like mental health, and it used to be stronger when I was growing up there.
Yeah.
So then it's very interesting because thanks to the opportunity of living abroad, and thanks to there is a much higher how could I say it? I've experienced now. I just returned from Mexico, and I'm very happy that the mental health talk, it's getting much more normalized, right? So it's getting much more. I also go to therapy. There is also the component of intergenerational, right? So then, for example, millennials, I'm a millennial, and then younger generations, they are much more in touch with, it's okay to cry. Like in Mexico, there is this, men don't cry, and then this kind of like very toxic masculinity is kind of like, no,
Yeah.
And then, everyone isn't, it's all feelings are valid and they are messengers. They are telling you something. If you're sad, what it's making you sad. If you're stressed, what in your environment is making you stressed. So then there is this, I believe, and I've noticed that younger generations, they have this more a openness to to explore, to learn more about
Right.
like mental health awareness, whereas in older generations, for example, like my parents, when I share with my dad, kind of like that we experience the same, like kidnap situation.
Yeah.
It's therapy is working it's working wonderful for me.
Yeah.
Like it sounds that it might work for you as well. And then my dad, he's a baby boomer, I believe so is
Yeah.
the generation. And then it's kind of like, no, I'm not gonna go to therapy. I'm not crazy. And again, crazy. I would love for us to change that word to, for example, wild or another alternatives. Just to be mindful that the language is very powerful.
Yeah.
And if we use crazy, we are kind of like perpetrating these, like mental health stigma.
Yeah.
So then my dad told me kind of like, no, I do not need someone to tell, I'm not going to tell my secrets to someone that I don't know. And it's very valid. Like my therapist told me that you cannot force people to go to therapy.
Right.
You can just share your experience and what you have learned, right? Because my therapist did something very visually that I remember to date, and that was like more than 15 years ago. So then she told me kind of like, if you are pushing your parents to go to therapy, they just kind of like you're just gonna kind of like go away, right?
Yeah.
It's kind of like, no, I'm not gonna. But then if you share your experience in therapy and then you say, okay, so this is what I have been learning about the brain, this is what I have been learning about myself.
Yeah.
I love therapy. I love it so much that I started with counseling, but I would love to, if I could, I would try each one of the hundreds of therapies that are available, right?
Yeah.
So I've tried cognitive behavioral therapy.
Yeah.
I have tried, like couples therapy, mediation, for example, which other somatic therapy? No, that one I want to try. I haven't tried that one. Occupational therapy, I want to try that one. I haven't tried that one. So then when I share with my students the number of therapies that are available, they are just kind of like, I have no idea. I thought it was just the psychotherapy and that's it, the talk therapy.
Yeah.
And then they get super excited because, and one of my students told me it's almost like a menu, right? So then, because sometimes what happens is that some people just try one type of therapy. It's kind of like, nope, therapy it's not for me. But it's like you go to one type of restaurant. Let's say you choose one type of cuisine, and then you decided that you don't like food at all whatsoever. You're never gonna try it again.
Yeah.
So then it's kind of like trying, like different types of what works for you, what doesn't work for you.
Absolutely, and I think it gives that like you said, this sort of optionality of like, this maybe talk therapy doesn't work as well for me, but something else might work better, right? And I'm able to find the things that work, and maybe it's hard for me to talk about how I feel, but maybe I'm able to convey it in other ways. I don't know, right? I think that's such a valuable thing to have that choice, have that option, and as we evolve as society and we think about mental health and we think about therapy in new ways, just thinking about that idea of, right, how can we make therapy available for people, inclusive for people, as many people as possible, and all sort of different ways of thinking and perspectives on what therapy is and should be and can be, and what they really need to be themselves. I want to talk about, right, you mentioned your dad and this kind of struggle, I suppose, to get him to understand, right, the value of therapy, because it's been so valuable for you, and I'm curious, right? It's something that often I see and my friends and who don't believe in therapy or don't believe in their own need for therapy. I have a friend who thinks therapy is great, but he doesn't think he needs it, and I guess everyone needs it, right? And I think that's the interesting thing, and it can be a struggle, right? Because how do I don't want, like you said, you can't really convince someone to go to therapy, right? You can't be like, you have to go to therapy, and you're like, okay, it doesn't work, right? It doesn't work. But how do you teach someone or explain or convey, right, your own experience to make them think about therapy differently, or help them think about therapy differently, and think about the world differently, and think about, okay, maybe it's something I should try, maybe it's something I should just see, right? It just takes, once you try it, and then if you don't like it, don't do it, but odds are you're going to like it because most people do it because it's helpful, because it works. And I think that's sort of the struggle, right, of trying to be a good friend and be a good daughter, and take care of the people that you care about and help them, and share what you've learned is important and helpful and effective. But also, you can't make them do things, right? They have to want to do them themselves. I think that's such a interesting struggle that we kind of all go through in life, frankly.
There's a beautiful balance that like you're sharing, right? So then so I love teaching because part of my so I teach for Harvard University, the Division of Continuing Education. So then I have the amazing opportunity to share knowledge with. In the summer school, we work a lot with high school students mostly. And then in the spring for Harvard Extension School, we actually have a very interesting community all the way from, university students. But one of my most experienced students, she has 72 years old. So then it's a beautiful combination of experiences and then of experiences and knowledge, right? And then what is very interesting is that when we have a conversation in both classes, the neurobiology class and then neurodiversity class.
Yeah.
And then something very interesting that we had is a debate on precisely what you're talking about, so mental health and therapy, right?
Yeah.
So then I remember very much the debate on I believe it was this year or the last year. Where one of my students, she was very passionate. It's kind of like, I really think that therapy is for everyone and everyone should have it and everyone should take it, everyone should benefit from.
Yeah.
And I completely agree with that. But at the same time, I've seen it with my parents. I just came to terms with, these radical acceptance, right?
Yeah.
I just and it's part of DBT, dialectic behavioral therapy. I just through radical acceptance, I just accept that they might never go to therapy, and the more and it's very valid in their perspective because I need to respect that. Mm-hmm. I need to respect that they are not ready and they might never be ready to therapy.
Right.
But at the same time, I really try to share. Like what have I learned in therapy? For example, my mom. I recently. I developed a company on artificial intelligence. Mm-hmm. I'm very interested because I would like to find, I would like to make it accessible to everyone.
Yeah.
Going all the way, so like a holistic view of environmental awareness, ethical awareness, all the way to introspection and interpersonal skills as well.
Yeah.
So then our the 4-week program actually combines all of that.
Right.
And then I invited my mom to the pilot which we actually had in October.
Awesome.
And I felt amazing because I really loved the opportunity to share the knowledge that I had the opportunity to gain, and then like share it with anyone that is willing to and open to learn from it, right? Yeah. And then we learn together as well. So then I love that my mom, my mom attended to the 4-week program. We made one session in 2 sessions in Spanish and 2 sessions in English.
Okay.
And my mom attended the Spanish one. And then it was amazing to share with her about the emotional regulation systems, like the threat system, the drive system, and the soothing system.
Yeah.
And then we also share about a fixed mindset and a growth mindset, right? So in my mind, it's kind of like we cannot force people to go to therapy, but we can start spreading the word of, like, this is what I learned. This is how I try to find inner peace. This is how I try to really find really embrace a growth mindset.
Yeah. You mentioned inner peace a couple times now with the meditation and that kind of silent week, and also in terms of growth mindset. Can you talk to me a little bit about what inner peace is to you? What does that look like?
I love that you're so observant. I love that. You're amazing. For me, inner peace has been like a journey in the sense that, for example, I once read this very powerful, infographic that I saw, on social media, that I actually tried to embrace because it read something like, success is finding inner peace. And then I thought, like, because I have several definitions of success, and those are constructs from cultural society and the way I grew up, right? So then for me, I always struggled with success because I do not have a conventional job. I do not have a 9 to 5. I try many times to have a conventional job. It doesn't work for the way my brain is wired.
Yeah.
Right. So then for me, like connecting those two, like success as finding inner peace was something very transformational for me. Because it's kind of like, okay, so as long as I am doing something that it's meaningful to me and it's helping people, and then that's my definition of success. And then that's combined with inner peace, because when you are kind of like focusing on, balancing your emotions, learning where they are coming from. Your emotions are actually, as I mentioned, messengers, right? They are telling you that something is happening in your environment.
Right.
A part of my PTSD, and we all experience intrusive thoughts. I'm not sure you're familiar with intrusive thoughts. Are you familiar with?
Somewhat.
So intrusive thoughts are these involuntary thoughts that just come as a human experience.
Right.
It could be violent, it could be suicidal thoughts, it could be, we all experience them throughout the lives, throughout our lifetime. But then I didn't know about them, right? So then I knew about them the first time that I love therapy, because this is where I learned about them.
Yeah.
Because during my experience with the traumatic situation, the kidnap, I've never noticed them before, my intrusive thoughts, but then they became very violent, and then I didn't understand them because they are completely opposite of what you are, your identity, right? So my intrusive thoughts were kind of like, no, if I'm ever being captive again, I'm just gonna grab a knife and then just gonna defend myself, and I'm like, no, I'm not a killer, right?
Yeah.
It was just so disturbing, like in the inside. And those evolved to suicidal thoughts, right? So then that's when like my journey, I didn't quite understand what was going on, what was happening, right? So this is where mental health is extremely important, because like I had in intrusive thoughts of just seeing myself next to the edge of a building. And then, for example, when I was in my PhD, I actually had access to like a rooftop where I had my crickets, because I also studied acoustics on crickets, communication in crickets. Thank you. So then something very interesting that happens that I would love to share, if I may.
Of course.
It was at the end of my PhD. So then because I was finishing and everything, so then I stayed a couple of nights in my office to finish everything.
Yeah.
So then there was this time that I had access again to the rooftop, right? And then I actually went to the top of the building, and it was about 6 a.m. in the morning, and I was actually wearing my pajamas because I was working at night the whole night.
Yeah.
And I just wanted to see the sunrise, right?
Okay.
So then I'm wearing my pink star pajamas.
Yeah.
And I go to the top of the building, and again, it's a rooftop, right? It's open, and I'm just lying there. I'm just kind of like laying there waiting for the sunrise. And it was a very, very powerful experience for me, because it was just the culmination, the finish of my PhD, and I was just lying there, right? Then I come down to my office, and then there are people, like knocking on every single door until they find me. And I was kind of like, it's everything okay? It was the security. It's kind of, is everything okay? Are you okay? I'm like, yeah, thank you so much. Because I'm so sorry. I just, like someone called because you were on top of the building on your pajamas. And then I felt, so this was in the University of Cambridge. And then I realized that, yes, that's true. Like there might be some difficult situations that someone, especially in those stressful times, that might.
That's where I thought you were going with this story.
that kind of like might committed suicide, and that has happened in different universities as well. For example, I went to Cornell for my first ever talk in public in English. It was very stressful.
Yeah.
But then there is I believe I remember there is a bridge that they called, they actually closed the bridge because several students very sadly would committed suicide.
Yeah.
And then in there, I thought it was very mindful that they were, like looking for me just to make sure that I was okay and that everything, is everything okay? I'm like, yes, thank you so much. Thank you for checking. So then I thought that it's very important that, higher education and all types of education, we are very mindful of mental health, as well as, for example, there was recently, I believe in October, there was a news saying that 1 million users ask about suicide to OpenAI GPT, for example. So then there is a really strong need to share about mental health, to learn about how can we just embrace our inner peace.
Yeah. It's when I was a sophomore in high school, we had a senior, I believe, committed suicide. Yeah, I didn't know him personally. It was a big deal at the school because he, I think, was someone that a lot of people look up to. He was, I think, by all accounts successful. I believe he was a captain of a sports team. I don't remember which team. He was the head of robotics club. Like, he was really, and people loved him. He was seemed to be a great person. I'd never met him. And I had a friend of mine who was in philosophy club. He was also the co-head of philosophy club, and they had spoken about existentialism the night before, and my friend very much blamed himself because he felt that if he wasn't as tired and if he had really, tried to argue more on his side that life was valuable, then maybe things would have been different. I think that guilt was a big thing for him, and was a huge thing for me because it was my friend, someone I cared about, and I didn't really know what to do. But yeah, I mean, suicide is a huge thing, and I think that losing that inner peace is something that it's so hard to see on the outside of people. People tell stories about people who commit suicide in the last few days, then they seem the happiest because they've kind of found, okay, I want to be okay. Like, everything's gonna be fine because I'm gonna be dead. And I think that is it's such a difficult thing for the person. It's such a difficult thing for the people around them, and it's so hard to see. It's so hard to spot. And that's why I'm here doing this and talking to you. And it's a huge experience for me. It was changed my life, changed the way I thought about mental health, thought about people around me. I wanted to share that as well. That's been my experience with suicide. That happened 3 years ago now. So, I was a sophomore in high school.
I am so sorry. I am deeply, deeply sorry, that you went through that experience with, a personal friend of you. And it's very powerful what you're doing. Like, it's extremely powerful because, when one person, sadly, decides to commit suicide, it's not just affecting the person, it has an impact in friends, family, the people around them.
Yeah.
Right. Thank you so much for sharing such a personal experience. And then it's very powerful because when I experienced those, and I sometimes I still experience them, and then I ask myself, what is happening on my surroundings, right?
Right.
But then when I didn't have the knowledge about, intrusive thoughts, suicidal thoughts, I didn't know how to understand them, right? So I didn't know, for example, how to explain, how to understand why I was, imagining myself just close to the edge. Because there are different types of suicidal thoughts. I actually started sharing more awareness about suicidal thoughts and then intrusive thoughts. And one of my very good friends, one of my best friends actually, she's from Chile, and then she told me, what? It's interesting that your intrusive thought is kind of like from a building, right? Her, it was on a bathtub, and then she had all these very very elaborated way, and for me it was fascinating. First of all, because when you share vulnerability, most of the time, sometimes it doesn't kind of if the person is not willing to share vulnerability, that's okay as well.
Yeah.
And that is something that took me a while to understand. But for example, what happens is that I start sharing vulnerability, right? So then I share about my kidnapped, my PTSD, my seasonal affective disorder, which is another thing that I experienced with the cold weather. So I never knew that because of my skin tone, I am prone to vitamin D deficiency, which is also related with depression, right? So then I didn't know that SAD, so seasonal affective disorder, which I love the acronym. That happens whenever there is low sunlight and also cold weather, right? So then I need to be mindful about that. But then also there is these amazing strategies as well. For example, there is something called TMS, transcranial magnetic stimulation, right? So this is a type of therapy where I actually did my first TMS at the beginning of this year, actually in the spring. And what it happens is that they are some magnets that they are placed in different parts of my head, on top of my head, and then, for example, I believe one is for the depression part. So then they activate the neurons, because what happens? The neurons are electrical, right? But electrical and also chemical. So there is a component between both of them. So when you have the neuron. And then you have electricity that sends the signal, right? So then let's say we have the electric signal, and then we have the chemical signal. That is where two neurons communicate, right? So then we have the neurotransmitters, which something very interesting about ADHD, which I live with ADHD, is that our levels of dopamine and norepinephrine, dopamine being the reward chemical, and norepinephrine, the alert one, the one that helps us to be alert, they are in lower doses, right? Just and something very interesting that I noticed that in Mexico, I didn't notice this because in Mexico you have like these very dynamic and environment where, for example, and I experienced this like literally last week. We were trying to cross this massive street, but then you have like buses coming, and then you have to run because the walking light is very short, and then you're trying like literally to survive. And then that I noticed that my norepinephrine, my dopamine were to the roof, because that's kind of like how I lived, right? How I survived in Mexico. And then I noticed living in the US that there is much more like stability, in the sense that thankfully in the environment that we are here, Massachusetts, it's very safe, tends to be very safe, right? So then, like to a certain extent in here, it's kind of like, okay, so my levels of that alertness or trying to survive, they are not activated, right? So then what happens? They are low. Right? So then there is the lack of motivation, the initiation task paralysis. That is something that we experience, neurodivergent individuals like myself. It's really hard to start things. So then there is kind of like really knowing about the brain. It really helps to for example, all the way from, we were talking about, how the brain works. And then, for example, PTSD, intrusive thoughts, ADHD, autism spectrum disorder, dyslexia. So really learning how the brain works, so how different brains are connected. Really, it's so powerful because we can, for example, look for ways to embrace each type of brain and connections.
Yeah, it's funny that aspect of task initiation. Like my mom gets mad at me for that all the time. It's like, you need to start the thing. I won't start it until the day of, and then I'm able to, once I start it, I could crank it out super fast, get it done, right? Super effectively in short amount of time. But it's like getting started is so hard. Always an issue for me. That's super interesting that you put that up. That's one of the biggest things I've had to work on, I suppose, in my life, is like just do things early, right? And get stuff done.
But it has a name, right? Exactly what we are talking about. It's amazing that when we have a name, and it's not like labeling in the sense that, you live with ADHD, and then it's not stigmatized.
And then this is how it is,
Exactly. It's more like knowledge, right? So knowledge is the key to understanding. A diagnosis is a key to understanding. And then when we know that we experience initiation task paralysis, like for me is the mail, right? So then I can, when I receive mail, I just pile it up because it's boring. It's something that it's not exciting to me. And then I just kind of like leave it there.
Yeah.
And then my brain is kind of bothering me. It's kind of, you look at those, all the pile of email, the mail or email.
Yeah.
And then it's very powerful to have a name for it. And then to start developing strategies, right? So, for example, something that I struggle with is creating healthy habits. And then my husband, he's amazing. So he gave me these. It's a Garmin Venue 3S. So then what this does to me, and it's amazing for the initiation task paralysis and creating healthy habits. I have been. I sort of like had like just one hope or one habit that I wanted to develop, and it's exercise. So then for me, exercise has been like very, very difficult for me to do, because in my mind it's kind of like I get bored in the gym, and then I have been very, very lucky that I've been like very like skinny my whole life, and then I developed an eating disorder because like I used to anorexia nervosa, because in my mind. Most of my classmates is kind of like, I love your body, you're so skinny. And then my brain actually started thinking, okay, so people like me because I'm skinny. So then I'm a fear of gaining weight.
So then I gotta stay skinny.
Exactly, I had to say, and that's where limiting beliefs come from, right? So limiting beliefs are these beliefs that are, formed when we are growing up or even as adults, and then trying to, and this is what cognitive behavioral therapy does, right? It analyzes those automatic or limiting beliefs, and then we analyze them consciously. Right. It's kind of like, where is this fear of gaining weight coming from? Right. And then it's very powerful to really, like, everything is connected. It's just so powerful how, like, knowing about the brain, therapy, and then really trying to find inner peace. We return to the inner peace component,
always
right? It's so powerful.
Yeah,
and then I have like the healthy habit that I was going to share. Sorry, I forgot.
No.
This is how an ADHD brain.
I love it.
Actually,
I'm thinking of things and then you're saying them. I'm like, this is great.
I love that. So the habit that I actually thanks to the fitness tracker is 10,000 steps. So today is my 102 and second day of walking 10,000 steps on a row.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Amazing.
That's a massive milestone, because
really
I do not I promise I cannot keep a habit for more than 3 days.
Yeah, that's super amazing.
Thank you. Appreciate you. So then it really helps too. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that reminders is such a powerful tool. Like, it became such a big thing for me. Like, I used to set alarms because I'd forget to, at school, we had a dining hall. I live at a boarding school at Phillips Exeter Academy, and dining hall closed at 7 p.m. That for dinner. That was it. I always had an alarm at 6:30. Like, if you haven't had dinner, please go have dinner, because you're not going to have food. I had to remind myself, otherwise I'd forget, and then I'd have to figure something out at night, and it's such a pain. So, the reminders is a huge thing for sure. Building habits, making sure that you're kind of aware of all the things that you have to do. Like, right? I think it's so easy to forget. Like, you might be like, I'm going to do 10,000 steps, and you do it for 2 days, and you do it for 3 days, and then the fourth day you forgot about it, right? You didn't have enough time, and it didn't happen, and then you're back at zero, and then once you're back at zero, it's like, oh, well, I already missed a day, let me miss 2 days, it's okay, then it builds up, and then and then I haven't done it in months, and then it's like, oh, man. So it's super awesome that you've been able to be consistent with that. That's really impressive.
You mentioned something. Thank you so much. I appreciate you. You mentioned something very interesting. So we're talking about time blindness, right? So then those alarms that we this one I also vibrates. I have like 3 alarms for pretty much everything.
Yeah, exactly.
So for example, so time blindness is another characteristic of neurodivergent individuals, right? So for us, the time doesn't work as a neurotypical brain would sense time, right?
Yeah.
There is this very interesting study about the day I believe it was younger, like children, and then some children with ADHD and some neurotypical children. So then they asked them, I believe, to sense what a minute was, right? Yeah. So then the neurotypical in children, so the ones that have the brain developed as a typical way, they were very good at sensing a minute, right? And then children with ADHD, they were kind of like either longer or shorter.
Right.
So the way we perceive time is different.
Yeah.
Right? So that's why alarms are amazing for us as well. You also mentioned hyperfocus, right? So we first experience initiation task paralysis, which is kind of like it's very hard for us to start.
Yeah.
But once we start, we can spend 14 hours working. And this happens to me with photography.
And I have to finish it. I can't stop in the middle. I have to finish it. Gotta get it done. Yeah.
Exactly. For example, I experience hyperfocus with photography, right?
Yeah.
So then I can spend 14 hours straight, like sometimes even forgetting to go to the bathroom, forgetting to eat, forgetting to like everything in just this hyperfocus.
Yeah.
I wonder it sounds that you experience also hyperfocus. So when have you experienced hyperfocus?
Oh, all the time. I used to, as I mentioned, I used to read a lot as a kid. I would read all day. I would forget to eat. I would forget to get up and walk around. I'd forget to go to bed. It'd be midnight, and I was 8 years old reading, and I got up at 7 and started reading, and I hadn't stopped like that. And my dad used to get mad at me because like, you got to eat food, and I'd be reading, and I totally, and like this is like. And this happened recently because I just flew back from Maryland, back home. I haven't been home, first time home in a couple months, which is awesome. And first thing I did, I got home and I was like, I have to unpack. And Mom was like, you just unpack later. I was like, if I don't unpack now, I won't unpack, and my stuff will sit here for weeks until the day that I have to leave to go back to California, and then I'm gonna be like, oh my God, I haven't unpacked, and I don't know what I have, and I don't know what I need to put back home. Don't know what I need to bring. And then it'll become a whole mess. So I have to do it now. I have to get everything out, put everything where it needs to go, and so I remember it, and I know where it is, and I can put stuff away, and be clear, and it doesn't like kind of weigh on me. And once I've started packing, I can't stop in the middle. Like I gotta get everything done, because if I stop in the middle, then I'm not gonna come back to it, and it becomes a whole mess. So absolutely, I have that. It's you kind of build those coping strategies in a sense, right? Ways to compensate for it, to work around it, right? Because I know that if I don't unpack, then I'm not going to do it, so I have to do it, and so I just make sure that every time when I get somewhere, when I land, when I come home, I unpack. First thing I do, just to make sure that I do it, because otherwise I know I won't. So there's sort of that, you build that kind of that strategy to deal with it. Yeah.
It's an amazing strategy. Like I promise I really try to embrace this strategy.
Yeah.
But then, for example, I arrived yesterday, right, from Mexico. And then my backpack is like all exploded. And then that sometimes can, as you mentioned, that can stay for like months. And even like my brain is kind of like, oh, see, you're like unorganized or like, but then it doesn't do anything to fix it. Yep. And it's kind of like, okay, so it's amazing what you mentioned, like really try, for example, just a few things, right? So then, even laundry, can stay clean and unfolded there for like days and days and days. But then, for example, if we do a little bit, like let's say I'm just gonna do three clothes, folding clothes, and I just gonna like the
I put my clean clothes on my bed because I can't go to sleep, so I have to put them.
That's very clever. See, those coping mechanisms are amazing, right? So then it's kind of, okay, so I'm going to, for example, fold while listening to a book or while listening to music, right? So
all the time.
Or
all
while
the
meditating.
Time. Yeah.
That is called habit stacking, right? Whenever you are stacking habits on top of them, so then you remember to do them.
Yeah.
So then again, see what we are doing here. Like we are putting names to things that we experience, and it's so powerful because I hope now that we remember, kind of like, okay, so I experience initiation task paralysis, I experience time blindness, I experience a hyperfocus. Another thing is hyperfixation. Right, hyperfixation is this very powerful way that neurodivergent individuals we experience. So for example, we would focus on a topic that is on our interest. For example, in my case, the first hyperfixation that I noticed is photography. Yeah. So then I became a photographer about actually more than 10 years ago now. But I went into photography like so wild, so power. Like I learned, I mostly learn online on what used to be lynda.com, which now is LinkedIn Learning. So then I took most of the photography that I could. I would do it at night after my PhD because. So for my PhD, what happens is that the topic that I this is something that I would love to share as well.
Of course.
Very, very powerful. So words are very powerful.
Yeah.
Because so the reason what I studied, what I did for my PhD is animal communication, so crickets. But I would never had studied that because my dream in life was to become a marine mammal scientist.
Yeah.
right? And then
Okay.
and that was kind of like my whole, like my dream, my life. That's what I studied in St Andrews in Scotland, marine mammal conservation. But then what happened in there? What happened in there is that I had my supervisor. So the way she mentored was not a way that was helpful for me, right? She was she had like these sort of like very strong way to mentor, in the sense that kind of like minimizing and patronizing a little bit, and then for example, I was the only non-native English speaker in that master's.
Yeah.
And then I would be the last at everything all the time, right?
Yeah.
I had a massive imposter syndrome. I was kind of like, they are going to notice that I don't belong here.
Yeah.
They're going to kind of like, they're going to catch me at any point, right?
Yeah.
And it was very, like being very, I'm very thankful that I was like a star student during my in Mexico, right? Because thanks to my parents, I had the possibility of just focusing on school.
Yeah.
Right, and then that's the reason why actually ADHD is undiagnosed in women, because we tend to mask. This is another term. Masking is trying to fit in, but at our expenses of we try 200% more than most of neurotypical individuals, right?
Yeah.
So then what happens in my master's is that I'm trying to cope. I'm studying in a second language. I'm trying to just survive, right? On a culture that I was not, I've never experienced before.
Yeah.
On an educational system that I never ever experienced before.
Yeah.
So I felt like a complete failure, right? And then on top of that, the mentorship that I was receiving from my supervisor was kind of like, oh, you know what? Yeah, you're struggling because you are from Mexico, and then you have a different system, and then it almost felt like discriminating. It's kind of like, so instead of, what I would have done, it was not helpful at all whatsoever. I just cry. I remember crying in her office like all the time. So looking back, that's the reason why I became very interested in neurobiology, human communication, negotiation, conflict resolution, how words can really change the path of someone.
Yeah.
You can elevate someone, or you can get them to the ground.
Yeah.
In this case, like my dream of becoming a marine mammal scientist completely was broken, right? And I give her the power of that, because when I told her, I would like to do a PhD, it's kind of like, no, you're not ready to do a PhD. And I was kind of like, okay, so, what else, right? And then, you're not independent enough. So then there might be, sadly, some people that might reflect on their own experiences, and then they tell you that you cannot do, they limit you, right? And I believe her. I believe her because I was very naive. I was very young. I didn't know about any of the things that I know now, and that's the reason why I love to share them, right? In NeuroDive AI is the startup that I have, that I really love to share this kind of like, you might encounter people that might limit you, that might tell you cannot do this, you cannot, but then that's a fixed mindset, right? And then I really try to embrace to all my students, to everyone that I interact with, a growth mindset, like, you can do whatever you want, and it's okay as well. If you decide that your dream that was your dream is no longer your dream, it's okay as well. The idea is to learn from our mistakes, a growth mindset, to really embrace and really look into ourselves, our self-awareness, and then say, is this really my dream? And we discovered in therapy that actually the dream of becoming a marine mammal scientist, it was a dream of my mom. Right? So I unconsciously, it's not that she told me, you have to be a marine mammal scientist. So I knew that she always wanted to be a marine mammal scientist, and I thought, oh, I can do this for you, Mom. I can do it. Right? But then when this person tells me, no, you cannot be a marine mammal scientist, and I'm like, okay, so then what am I good for? What am I here for? And also it's a combination. After the kidnapped, I had this very existential crisis, in the sense that, why did I survive? Many people don't survive.
Yeah.
Right? It's just like a very powerful
survivor's guilt sort of thing.
Yes,
exactly. Absolutely. It's so interesting. Hey, can we talk about imposter syndrome? Because I think that's such a powerful thing that I think everybody sort of feels at different junctures in life and different situations. And you mentioned it when you were in Scotland, that it was such a big thing for you because you felt like you didn't belong, and you felt like, because you didn't speak English. how do someone overcome that? How do you push past that? How have you pushed past that?
I love the question. It took years.
Yeah.
It took many, many years, especially because I was not aware of the term, right? Imposter syndrome.
Right.
I had no idea. Like in Mexico, there is something that, again, like, this lack of mental health awareness, terms that, would be, are very important.
Yeah.
So I experienced imposter syndrome, but I didn't know about it, right? And I actually didn't know about it through all the year that I was there doing my master's. I just felt it, right? I just felt that I didn't belong there. I just felt that, like every of my peers are brilliant. They had, like previous degrees. They were studying in their own language. They were absolutely brilliant. And for me, I saw them and then it's kind of like, you are just perfect, right? But I didn't see, for example, that they might have been also struggling in their own way.
Right.
And there is a word that we talk about in our class is something. It's a word called shunned. Shunned. It's a very interesting, and I didn't know about this. Shunned is a word that basically talks about that each one of us has this unique life experience. Right? From the way that we are born until right now, we have such a powerful story that each one of us has. So shunned is like realizing that each one of us has their own traumas, their own experiences, their own life journeys, and then embracing and being empathetic about the life of each one of us. It's very powerful, but at the same time, it's very important to, not just because I had like the traumatic experience, I'm just going to be, like lashing out on anyone and then be angry all the time. It's kind of, there is also, I really hope to communicate that there are ways that we can get better. Again, we can find inner peace, and this is something that the only way that I have found inner peace is through therapy and through meditation. That's the only way that I have, in my experience, found this peaceful and balanced way of regulate my brain.
Yeah. Can we talk about AI therapy? Something that I've talked about. I had a guest in this podcast, my first guest in this podcast, Mr. Will Furness. He and I talked about AI therapy a lot, and I'm so curious. It's as you mentioned, that ChatGPT and people using that as a way to talk about how they're feeling, or to talk about or ask about why they're feeling a certain way. And in some ways it feels like a natural evolution because it's accessible, because you don't have to go somewhere, you don't have to you can reach more people. Anyone with internet and a device can access AI. But there's also like, is it human enough, right? Is there a human element? Can you connect with a robot in a way that you can connect with a human being and sit in a room and cry and get Kleenex, and you know what I mean? Like, that is that a thing that you can do with a robot? No, right? At least not right now. And so it's such an interesting topic for me in terms of how that is maybe an evolution in therapy, or is it not?
That's a very powerful question, and actually, this is something that we took on the 4-week program.
Yeah.
And one of my attendees had this very powerful contribution. The thing is that I was explaining that education is extremely important, first of all, and a human in the loop, what we call kind of like therapy through a human professional. It's essential.
Yeah.
And the reason why I mentioned this is because through more than 10 years in therapy, now I have the education and the knowledge to know what to ask for, what to like how to embrace AI as a mental health aid, because I have my human therapist. I have had work with him for like more than 5 years in here, but I have done other types of therapy. But so it's extremely important to really to have a professional human in terms of mental health. But then what happens? Mental health might not be accessible to all. It could be very expensive. It could be hard to find the therapist and the therapy that works for you.
Yeah.
So then in that regard, AI can be helpful. For example, if we ask, okay, so what types of therapy do you recommend for me, for example?
Right.
So then sometimes what what is very interesting is that, my GPT, they are called G, and they are they, them. So then G knows me really well, like scarily very well, like probably most that I know myself, which is very, very scary. But at the same time, it's very interesting because I can ask, actually there is a setting that you can say, save the memory, which means that it will, they will remember conversations from previous, like conversations, right? Or you could also opt out, that do not link in between conversations.
Right.
But it's extremely important to mention that AI can make mistakes and makes mistakes, right? There is this a term called hallucinations. Sometimes, for example, I ask about cognitive behavioral therapy, and then we're talking about, okay, so this is what happens to a friend, and then AI makes a mistake, and then the story that I'm telling about a friend that I need, for example, conflict resolution advice, it tells, like, you feel this way. It's kind of, no, I do not feel this way. It's my friend that is experiencing this that I would like to, embrace and help, right? So then it's extremely important, first of all, when talking about AI, to really be mindful that it can make mistakes and it makes mistakes, right? So then it's extremely important to cross-check the information always, make sure that it makes sense. Something that I do and I would recommend for everyone, not just neurodivergent individuals, is, for example, Speechify is an app, and there might be also other apps that actually Speechify was the founder, I believe, lives with dyslexia and with ADHD.
Right.
And then what happens is very interesting. Neurodivergent individuals, we can, for example, in my experience, I can spend half an hour just reading a paragraph just because I get distracted and it depended on the time. But then, we
especially
can...
if it's not the most interesting thing.
As well, but also, we can listen to information like 2 to 3 times faster than a neurotypical individual. So then I can listen to a book in, a day, 2 days, 3 days, a whole book. Like reading a whole book, reading it, that would have been just unimaginable for me, right? So audiobooks for me work amazing. I need to listen to the information, and when I listen, my brain starts my mind starts doing a picture, and then I remember things. Something that I do with my students, for example, is that I am trying to do an evolution of education, right? So then exams that are just based on rote memorization, they never work for me because my memory I isolated individual terms that, like dates or something, they don't make sense to me and I don't remember them. But then when we are talking about, okay, so life skills, so then I assess my students with presentations, Pechakucha presentations, which is a Japanese storytelling way to share information. So my students have to understand the subject, and then they have to think how to present it. We also do infographics, right? So then explain, for example, what is ADHD, what is neuroplasticity. So they really have to learn about what is the concept and then really connect the subjects. And then we do also connections between lectures, right? So like how, for example, neuroplasticity is connected to emotional regulation systems or to neurotypes being ADHD, dyslexia. So then we try to, and I forgot. See, this is how my brain works. I forgot the question, but then we go like places. That I hope it's about AI. Yeah. So always, I remember.
There you go.
So always cross-checking the information. Always make sure that that, for example, as a first approach for therapy, it's it can tell you what type of therapy you are available, and then you can decide which one you would like to try. With a human, right? So always keeping a human in the loop, but also it's very powerful as a first approach, right? I actually train my AI. I tell, for example, and this is something that we work on the 4-week program. So, for example, you are an expert in cognitive behavioral therapy, dialectic behavioral therapy, neurobiology, and neuroplasticity, right?
Yeah.
And then I ask, okay, so here is the questionnaire of cognitive behavioral therapy. Then ask me questions, right, about that. But then also very important to bear in mind as well with AI is environmental awareness. So then I used to ask all the time, but then they are kind of like resources that every time that you ask, you are, like using the server. So then what I do now, is that instead, also I'm very polite. So then I would say, kind of after receiving the response, I would say thank you, and then it would reply to me, "You're welcome." But then there was this article that says that whenever you are polite to AI, you are wasting environmental resources.
Yeah.
So to blend these, I kind of like say thank you and please on the same question, so that I do not generate more. I do not waste energy. But then something also that I recommend to my students is that instead of, for example, if I am working on cognitive behavioral therapy, instead of saying, "Ask me first question and then I reply first," what I do is that I gather all the information on a Google document, right? Or like a Word document.
Sure.
And then after doing that, I just, all the collected data or the information, I just put it on the AI to analyze it instead of asking every single time, because that's wasting environmental, like the water that is used to cool down the servers, as well as, every time that you ask, there is an environmental cost, right?
Yep,
which might be invisible, but it's very important to talk about it.
Absolutely.
So cross-checking information and environmental awareness, I would say.
Absolutely.
And education.
Do you feel like there is an evolution to AI in where it can be somewhat or even a full replacement to a human being in therapy, or is that not possible? I know it's
very good questions. Very, very good questions.
And it's hard to predict these things because we don't know. But I'm just curious.
There are these terms. Thank you for the question. There's these terms, for example, at the moment, AI is a tool, right? It's a tool that we can use for hopefully benefit.
Yeah.
The thing is that as my Richard Mullender, he's my mentor in negotiation. What he mentioned is that what I'm about to teach you, you can use it for, and I love the analogy. You can be like a Star Wars. It could be like you can be Luke Skywalker, or you can be Darth. How do you pronounce
Vader.
it? Vader. Thank you. I don't know how to pronounce it.
Okay.
But then, so the idea with AI is that we would like to ideally educate ourselves how to use it for a benefit. There was recently a news, I think yesterday, the day before yesterday, that there was the first cyber attack. It was a news through Anthropic Claude, right? So there was this cyber attack of an AI that was trying to enter to banks, or to like really trying to orchestrate a cyber attack.
Yeah.
But then with these powerful AI tools now, it can be even more easy to do it, because the machine it recognizes patterns, right?
Yeah.
And it's not that it. So it's very interesting, because then we can use it to the good. Hopefully we use it for good, but it can also be used for bad.
Yeah.
So then the idea is
Absolutely.
to create education and then to train ourselves to really embrace AI, but also because it's there already, right? But how can we use it in a way that is ethical, in a way that is environmental, there is environmental awareness, there is education behind it. So I really think that a human cannot be replaced, especially in therapy.
Yeah.
It can be a complement. A complement can definitely be possible. So then, as a complement, yes, 100% AI can be a complement to human therapy. But I really think that the knowledge. It's interesting.
It is, absolutely.
Because like AI is basically a machine that recognizes patterns, right?
Right.
And in one of Harvard's AI conferences, that say that AI can be more persuasive than humans. And then I also read this. I also listened to this amazing book, Nexus, that I highly recommend. Nexus by Yuval Harari, I believe so. Okay. So Nexus, in this book, that says that they test AI in terms of therapy and how empathetic can be AI, and actually AI can be more empathetic than humans, right? So then there is kind of like this component of there is always professional human in the loop of mental health, but also there is this powerful help or intern which is AI, that can also help us to embrace what we learn in therapy, and also talk about like critical thinking. So then I actually train my students, my learners, on really how can we use AI as to embrace critical thinking. And for example, let me give you an example if I may. So for the course that I did on Harvard, it's called Gen Ed 1188. So Professor Logan, he's amazing. He's my AI mentor. Logan McCarty, exactly.
Him, yes.
He's amazing.
He's incredible.
I wonder if he would be an amazing for a podcast.
I've talked to him a lot. Yeah,
he's amazing.
He really
highly. So he in his course, I had the opportunity to take this 6 months course that he gave on the rise of the machines, Gen 1188. And it was amazing. So most of the things that I know about AI is from that 6 months course at Harvard by Professor McCarthy. And then something very interesting so they recommend us to, one of the assignments was to read Frankenstein, right? And then the book of Frankenstein. And then, I don't remember reading it in school. Maybe I did, but I really don't remember.
Yeah.
And then when I listen to it, because when I read it, I have read it, perhaps at school. But then when I listened to the actual book, it was amazing. It had like these, like voices, the creature, something, and then Victor, and it was so engaging to listen to it. But then I went above, right? I was kind of like, how can I teach critical thinking with AI? So then what I did was, first of all, I listened to the whole book. And then what I did in Notebook LM was to create a mind map of the book, right? So then it gave me by chapter what happened, and then it gave this amazing mind map through Notebook LM. And then after the mind map, I was kind of like, I want to go above, like a critical thinking. Okay, so and then I actually asked the AI a prompt saying, okay, so these are 3 questions, critical thinking questions that I had from the book.
Right.
One of them, it was something about the relationship between Victor Frankenstein, the person who actually built the creature. Because before I thought Frankenstein was the creature, but the creature is not Frankenstein. The Frankenstein is the creator, right?
Yeah.
And then I asked kind of like a question about that, and also nature versus nurture, right? So if the creature would have been raised on a caring environment, would the creature have become a killer, right? So then I actually told AI, okay, so look for those critical thinking questions and create 10 more. And the questions that created about the book Frankenstein, like critical thinking questions, they were amazing. It was talking about like different aspects that I didn't even thought about.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
Using AI for critical thinking, ask me, tell me critical thinking questions. It was just fascinating, and I went above. It was kind of like, no, I want even more. So then I was kind of like, okay, so you share with me critical thinking, my GPT. You share critical thinking questions, but then I went above a video, and I'm like, okay, so the writer of Frankenstein. It was a female writer, right?
Yeah.
Mary Shelley, I believe so. And I'm like, tell me more about the cultural context, like how a woman could write a novel so influential.
Yeah.
What was her background, right? So then from that, I learned that Mary Shelley came from a family of literate parents. So then I believe that the parents, I don't remember exactly, but the thing is that their parents, I don't remember exactly, but then her upbringing lead her to actually becoming a novelist, a writer, right? And then she had a very tragic story with her husband. She married very young, and then I knew all of this just because of asking AI. Tell me more about the cultural context. The for example, women. What was the context that women lived in, that were women able to write novels. And actually in the book, I believe so, she didn't put her name as women, right? It was just like an alias, for example, not her name, but just the surname, for example.
Yeah, right.
And then it explained this amazing cultural context that is the different perspectives. And you can do that with AI, right? You can embrace critical thinking and also perspectives, right? So learning about, tell me more about different, could work as well for conflicts, right? World conflicts. Explain me the different views from this particular context.
Right.
And you can have like a more balanced way, because what happens is that we might just be in social media, the algorithms are amazing to just confirmation bias, right?
Yeah.
What
Absolutely.
what I believe, they already confirmed that.
Absolutely.
But what about the other perspectives? And that's amazing, because it gives you, AI can give you a very balanced a view of the different points of view, and you can decide. It's kind of like, okay, I'm still having this view, but I know I am aware now of the other point of view, which is very powerful.
Yeah, and I think there's such an interesting thing. You mentioned AI being able to persuade people, sometimes even better than humans. And I think that we as people often, and people do this with search engines all the time, where it's like, well, someone told me this, but Google said that thing, so this Google must be right. I think the same thing happens with AI, and there's a pro and a con to that, where it's like, yes, it has access to far more information than any of us do because it has access to everything that's ever been published and everything online. But at the same time, you mentioned confirmation bias, right? It's going to give you the result that it thinks will make you happy, and not necessarily the result that it thinks is accurate or correct or anything like that. I think it's a funny thing that we do as human beings, where we have this sort of trust in robots that we don't understand, at least most of us, and could never operate, and just believe them because we believe that they know more than we do. And I suppose objectively they do, but they don't utilize the knowledge in the same ways that we do. And I think it's such a fascinating thing, how that kind of dynamic occurs.
I love what you mentioned, because what you mentioned is very powerful. So what we learned about in Gen 1188 was actually kind of like how to think about how the LLMs, large language models, GPT, Claude, Gemini, how are they trained? What is the data that they use to be trained? Right. And then, because the data that they use to be trained, usually the first one was kind of like Wikipedia, and then, for example, the whole internet. But then what happens? There is bias in, for example, most of the information in their internet, for example, is in English. Right. There's a consideration of language. My sister-in-law was telling me, I work with my GPT in English because in Spanish it's not the same analysis, the same depth of analysis. So it's very important to bear in mind that the data that was used to train different AIs is different. Right. And also to be mindful that data can be biased. Right. And then to be mindful, okay, so how can we embrace that, to bear in mind this critical thinking that the data can be biased, and then just the answers can be biased as well. Right. So then this critical thinking is extremely, extremely important in the era of AI.
Absolutely. I end every podcast with the final question. What are some words you choose to live by, and why?
Some words to live by.
Just off the dome, doesn't have to be, anything fancy.
I think is redefining success to our own, that works for us. For example, in my case, these success being finding inner peace, that really works for me, that really resonates for me, as well as I really hope for humanity to embrace a growth mindset and to a critical thinking, to really be self-aware whenever we are experiencing a fixed mindset, right? We are going to experience it because of the way we grew up in any country, in any culture. We're going to experience a fixed mindset thinking. But then being able to critically think, okay, is this a fixed mindset or a growth mindset? Right? Is this, am I just kind of like learning from my mistakes? Am I, trying? Am I, helping society? Am I becoming, am I helping to build a better society? So I would finish with, success as inner peace, but also combined with a growth mindset, and really, really building a more neuro-inclusive society, and basically redefining the systems that, accommodations cannot just be accommodations. There can be a rebuild of how society is to be more neuro-inclusive, and then embracing a mental health awareness as well.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
My pleasure.
This is awesome.
Thank you so much for everything.